myself again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you. If I don't say to...
Hi, welcome along to NUFC Matters. This is a pre-recorded show with me, Steve Wraith, and Ben Jacobs. Hi, Ben. How are you?
I'm good. Usually when I hear the word pre-record, I would be shuddering, but now the window's shut. I think we're safe.
Yeah, well, we can't get much wrong in a show where we're not looking at transfers. I am actually expecting a delivery as well. So I have pre-recorded the adverts to stop us pausing the show, just so anyone knows that when I suddenly go, right, we're going to do the adverts, that's why I'm doing it. But anyway, plenty to talk about with Newcastle United and nationally as well, Ben. I mean, you're up in Edinburgh. You've been to see, the Queen Line and State.
Yeah, so the Queen at the time of recording is still in Edinburgh and will be on her way to London. And it was very solemn but celebratory at the same time, as I think you would expect, because you find that people come out in their numbers to pay their respects, and it is ultimately a procession eventually leading to a funeral and a service in London. But by the same token, I think that people are very much touched by the Queen, and they understand the significance beyond just her sad passing, particularly for those that are maybe a little bit older, and she's been a constant within their life. And I completely appreciate that lots of people have different opinions on the monarchy, all of which I respect. But we're also just talking about a phenomenal woman, regardless of your opinion specifically on the monarchy, who was a grandmother and a mother and a leader and a captivating personality. And I can't think of any other person or profession that would be working so diligently and passionately right up until their passing. And that is why I think that image with Liz Truss was so poignant. Just 2 days, I believe, before the Queen died, she was still fulfilling all of her duties. She was still trying to unify a country, a Commonwealth, and a nation. And in Edinburgh, there were huge crowds around the Royal Mile where the coffin was brought to, and it then lies in that place after the service for 24 hours before it will eventually reach its final resting place in Westminster. And there was a whole range of different people, young and old, those that kind of dressed more for a funeral in black, those that were more celebrating her life. There were naturally flowers and banners. And it's just really interesting when you talk to all the different people that are actually waiting. And that's one of the things that is very unique about this situation, that to get into the St. Giles Cathedral, to walk past the coffin, you have something in the region of a 5 to 7 hour wait. And there were people queuing through the night. And during that wait, you're talking to people. So you make new friendships, you hear different perspectives, you learn why and how people are touched in different ways. You see different generations, some of which have lived through the entire Queen's reign of 7 odd decades, and others that are maybe still teenagers and are moved in a very different way and have got a perspective of the Queen that's more recent. So young kids are talking about the Queen and Paddington Bear. Slightly older people are talking about the Queen and the James Bond appearance. And then the older generation maybe met the Queen. My uncle, for example, is a Toastmaster, which for those that are maybe a little bit younger is just a glorified version of an MC, but it's a bit more ceremonial. And he used to go in and do some of the royal events, including the Jubilee, and announce her coming into the room. And I think that people that have met the Queen through teas, through knighthoods, there's obviously a lot of people within football specifically that have met the Queen because they've been honoured. They all seem to have the same story, which is their interactions with her are naturally quite brief, but she had this way of disarming them and making them feel at ease. And I've never met the Queen personally, but as I've just said, somebody in my family has. And my grandparents went to a tea with her as well. And I think everyone's very nervous. What are they going to say? How do you bow? Is there any etiquette? Are you going to get told off for something that you're not even aware of? Because there's pomp and there's ceremony. And seemingly, from what I hear, the Queen and her corgis actually as well were just very good at instantly disarming, instantly reading the room, instantly finding a way to develop this kind of common ground and put laughter into an unexpected moment, or it just make you feel very relaxed. And I think when you take that skill and then you translate it as a global figurehead, an ambassador, representative of the monarchy and the Commonwealth, that one skill would have been very useful. And it's kind of important to think of the Queen in that context and to think of her as somebody that took to the throne incredibly young. And that, I think, is what younger generations, myself included, don't really anticipate or consider, because we think of the Queen as this constant, as this immortal figure, as somebody that looks a lot older than us, that kind of hasn't aged almost seemingly since she was maybe in her 70s. She always dressed bright. She always looked the same. She always acted the same. And that was the constant in our lives. But let's not forget that she made her pledge at the age of 21. So that's quite a burden to take on as somebody that age. And I think if people that are currently that age in their 20s think of it in that context, they'll have a very different perspective of not this kind of regal, older, calm, poised, constant figure, but this young woman that was asked to take on a massive responsibility without any real experience after her own father unexpectedly died. And that, to me, even though we didn't live through it, you and me anyway, specifically, it puts a whole different perspective on it to me. And even though Charles now is 73, it just kind of tells you once again that when you take on this role, whatever your age, but particularly if you are younger, and it will be the same, I think, for William and Harry, any royal really, regardless of their title, it's a burden, it's a lot of responsibility, it's a challenge, because you have to change your entire life overnight. And I think that is a really important point to make. And hopefully, as the monarchy adapts and changes, and I know that there's people that are critical of it and don't think it should exist, and as I've said before, I fully respect that opinion. But I think that as it changes, and it will have to change with a new king and going forwards as well, we're maybe going to see more about what it entails. And we're certainly viewing a different perspective of how being a royal comes with that burden through William and Harry in particular, and with the digital landscape too. And that's good and bad, because it allows that affinity, it allows that direct contact, it allows you to see more behind the scenes. But we realize the pressure as well. So when you consider that the Queen lived through all of that for 7 odd decades and handled it with such poise and balance, and then you add to the fact that she was a mother and a grandmother and she worked until her final days, I just think that's incredible. And that's why personally I wanted to go and pay my respects. And it was just really interesting talking to all the different people that were queuing up and making that walk to St. Giles Cathedral, and having that bizarre mix of sort of sadness and solemnness, but also celebration as well. And it's just one of those moments, I think, that you have to be a part of. And all of us that were, and those watching on TV, I'm sure will remember for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, 100%. Of course, the Queen presented Newcastle with the FA Cup in 55. Let's hope King Charles is doing the same with Newcastle in 2023. Even the League Cup, that would do. Was it the right thing to cancel football? It seems to have divided opinion, because obviously cost of living crisis has people's minds focused on their finances a lot more heavily now, Ben, and, you know, cancellation of trains, hotels, etc. But I personally feel it was the right thing to do. This is a one-off situation, you know, something we've been all thrown into. And I think a 1 week period of grace was the right thing to do.
I think that after it happened, there were decisions that needed to be made so quickly. And obviously, if the decision wasn't erring on the side of caution, and by caution, I mean one that would be seen as the most respectful, then there was always a danger if things went ahead and didn't go according to plan. Then at that point, those making the decision would look red-faced. And I think that the Premier League and the EFL have been clear on that they only had about an hour after the meeting to make their decision. and the national mourning guidelines and the DCMS very much told the leagues that the decision was up to them. So therefore, a unified decision was almost made to call off the games. And I understand the different perspectives. Personally, I think that when you have a minute's silence or wear a black armband, it is a powerful gesture, but it's something that we've done before in a variety of different circumstances, whereas calling off all of the games is more of a unique reaction that tells you the importance and the solemnness and the sadness of the Queen's passing. So that's one perspective, but I also appreciate that there's people that are out of work and that there are fans that would have liked to sing God Save the King for the first time and show their respects in a setting that they're familiar and passionate about. And that could have been very powerful as well. And obviously then there's other considerations. So I think to begin with, people were looking at it in terms of, is it or isn't it respectful towards the Queen? But it goes a bit deeper than that, because you also have to look at safety and security. You have to look at, is there enough policing? And you have to think too about the FA's position, who aren't directly able to control a decision made by, say, the Premier League or the EFL, but a unified response was needed. And the president of the FA has just lost his grandmother in Prince William. And I think that's a factor as well, that direct affiliation. And I'm sure that the royal family were not able to directly input or be a part of these meetings, but inevitably through proxies and civil servants and advisors and so on, it would have been relayed to the FA whether or not the royal family felt that it was appropriate to dive straight into sport. So there's all of these kind of factors that get played into making a decision. And then you've got effectively, after the guidance comes out, an hour to decide. And that's why I think the decision was taken. But I can see it from both sides. And I think as long as people venting a complaint that games were called off do so respectfully, remembering, as I said before, that the Queen was a grandmother and a mother and an iconic figure, that's fine. And naturally, some people directly affected because they're out of work, and with the cost of living, as you say, so high at the moment, and gas prices being an issue as well, there are lots that will say, well, they're out of work because of the situation, or they'd made plans for the weekend, or they'd already booked a train and a hotel to go and see a match. And that is very unfortunate, and I have 100% empathy for that as well. But my personal opinion is that there was so little time to make a decision, and there were arguments on both sides. But if the leagues had proceeded with doing the games, and then there was a safety issue, there wasn't enough police, the national anthem was not sung respectfully, and so on. If there was any one thing, and I don't really like bringing this up, so I'm going to gloss over it quite quickly, but if you look at the Trevor Sinclair saga and how one disrespectful tweet that caused offence because of the way it was worded, regardless of whether people are pro-monarchy or not monarchy, and I don't really want to get into the tweet specifically, and I know Trev and I like Trev, but it's clear that that tweet was not worded in the right way, which is why he subsequently deleted it. But if you look at that one thing and how suddenly some of the back pages are about Trevor Sinclair and the Queen instead of just respect for the Queen, that tells you that if there's any arrests, if there's any issues, if there's any problems around the anthem, if there's any clashes between perhaps pro or anti-monarchy fans and so on, if there's any one thing that goes wrong, then at that point it can overshadow the media landscape. And instead you just create this period of contemplation, take some time off from the games, let everyone pay their respects, and then return to football, and then let everyone pay their respects again through a football environment. And, you know, I've thought about it, and naturally it could have also been the opposite. It could have been impeccably observed. It could have been very powerful. Hearing people sing God Save the King for the first time across every football ground, from Premier League all the way down to grassroots, could have also been amazing. But like I say, everyone had an hour to decide. And if I think where my own head was at in the aftermath, 1 hour after either the passing or the guidance was given, I still didn't know what the best approach is. And if you don't know what the best approach is, I think then an approach of caution was probably more prudent. And that's why I think the games were called off. If there was more time, if there was a chance for direct fan feedback, if the police and the relevant authorities had that opportunity to kind of have 2 days, maybe the decision would have been different. But I think that it's really easy retrospectively to watch the games be called off and then to come back quite quickly and to say a mistake was made. But let's not forget that now we're judging it a week on almost, whereas when they had to make that decision, it was in a very unknown kind of area, and it was only hours after the Queen's passing. And that's why I think that decision, probably based out of caution and to make sure that nothing went wrong and that there were going to be no transport or police issues, was probably the right call.
Yeah, I would agree, mate. Football-wise, Newcastle were thrown into what potentially could have been a bit of a goalkeeping crisis, but managed to get that sorted within 24 hours. And just reading the initial interviews with our new goalkeeper, Karius, it took him 10 minutes to decide to come to Newcastle, which shows you the pull of our great club now.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's a really smart signing as well, a player with Premier League experience. Usually when you rush to get maybe a goalkeeper at the last minute and it all gets formalized outside of the closing of the window, you might expect it to be a veteran who's in their mid-30s, but actually you're talking about a 29-year-old who has played for Liverpool and has more recently, although still with the affiliation to Liverpool, been on loan at Besiktas and Union Berlin, and obviously before Liverpool as well, excelled at Mainz. And a lot of people don't realise that a part of his youth for a couple of years was at Manchester City as well. And I think that he comes with a lot of pedigree. The Liverpool fans will always point to the mistakes when he was playing against Real Madrid in the Champions League final, for which Liverpool were runners-up in the 2017-28 season. But if you kind of dig a little bit deeper, what you actually have is an excellent shot stopper, a very intelligent goalkeeper, and with pretty good distribution as well. So I think it's just win-win, really, from the perspective of the Newcastle front, because we know that Nick Pope is going to be the number one goalkeeper, and this is just a very solid backup and a reasonably young backup for a second choice goalkeeper as well. In the ideal world, as Eddie Howe said, he would have liked to keep Dubravka at the club, but Dubravka wanted to go to Manchester United, and that was that. And it's strange, I think, when you negotiate with a second choice, because if you're second in line as a striker, unless only one's being played up top, you're playing. If you're second in line in virtually any other position, centre-back, you're going to be one of two, you're playing. Centre midfield, you're going to be one of two, you're playing. And then if you're a wide player, you might play as many games as you start on the bench, but you're certainly going to get minutes. You're likely, if you're the number two choice, to be quite integral. But obviously with a goalkeeper, it doesn't work like that. As soon as you become the number two, if you're a defined number two, which I think Karius is, I don't think he's there to go blow for blow with Nick Pope. I think Pope's the number one, and Karius knows that he's joining as a number two. So therefore, you're basically going to play in the League Cup. And going forwards, if Newcastle get into the Conference League or the Europa League, he'll get some game time there. He might be the FA Cup goalkeeper. It remains to be seen, and how seriously Newcastle take that. So it's a strange position to be in. And I think that's the challenge with Dubravka, really, that he's spent so much time at Newcastle playing, and suddenly Pope's come in and he's not playing. So he wants to go and be part of Manchester United. And it's a perverse situation, because he might find himself playing in the European part of the season, depending on how seriously Manchester United take the Europa League. And that's a step up, and he's probably been rewarded quite well financially as well. Whereas I think with Karius, he's done all that at Liverpool. So now he can be part of the project and be excited by the momentum that Newcastle are building. And because he's only 29, if anything goes wrong with Nick Pope, or if he just excels in training and in the few opportunities that he's given, then who knows? And it's very sensible from Newcastle because they can keep him maybe for 4 or 5 years as a number 2 goalkeeper. And if everything goes according to plan, he might force his way into the team. And if it doesn't, you've got that longevity. Whereas say they'd have gone in for a Kasper Schmeichel, who eventually went to Nice, and we spoke about it on this show. Then, first of all, Schmeichel didn't want to be a number 2 goalkeeper, which is why he went to Nice. And then second of all, if he had been persuaded to join Newcastle United, then he's in his mid-30s. So you're not getting that same longevity. And then you've got a headache again in a window or two about trying to find another number 2 goalkeeper. So I think the move just makes a lot of sense all around.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about that at all for me. I think Newcastle United have got themselves an experienced goalkeeper who, if needed, can be called upon. Nick Pope, as well, is a step closer to maybe getting that England jersey, Ben, with an injury to Jordan Pickford.
Yeah, it's very possible, isn't it? And it wouldn't surprise me if he plays his way.
Oh, hold that thought. I did mention at the start of the programme, there could be a knock at the door. Here it is. Here's the ad. And it's time to thank our sponsors of the show. Thanks to skipsandbins.com, telephone 0800 25 45 25 3, email inquiries at skipsandbins.com, website www.skipsandbins.com, easy contract free and pay-as-you-go waste collection. Thanks to Darren Baldwin Funerals. You can find them at 304 Old Durham Road, Gateshead, NE8 4BQ. Telephone 0191 478 2730 or website www.darrenbaldwinfunerals.co.uk. Thanks to Garden of Healing Dispensary, CBD hemp and cannabinoid specialists, www.gohd.com. And thanks to 3 Properties. They specialise in sourcing investment properties for their clients who are looking to invest in the North East. They offer a full in-house service from sourcing the deals to managing the properties for you. They've done over 100 plus deals in the past 12 months for clients all over the UK. Give them a follow on Instagram, matty.patter_northeast property and phil.reed_northeast property, or email phil@3property.co.uk should you be interested in getting a good property deal. Thanks also to Mr. Vicky's Sauces, handmade in Cumbria. You can find them at mrvickys.co.uk or by telephoning 01768 210 102. Thanks to Media Arts for all the help with the video side of things. And thanks to qtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wallsend, Newcastle, and the guys who run our website, nufcmatters.com. If you want to subscribe to the show, hit the NUFC Matters logo in the bottom right-hand corner and you can subscribe for free. Hit the thumb up under the video and click share to share to your social media. Drop into the comments box to speak to like-minded Newcastle fans and to post a question on screen. We're also available as a podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and the rest. Usually goes up 24 hours after the show. And if you want to join the show, hit join underneath the video, or you can go and spend £25 at the website, nufcmatters.com. It is a one-off payment. And you can also put your smartphone over the QR code, which will take you straight there. What do you get for your money? Well, you get a cup, you get a pen, you get a scarf and a membership card and entry into the monthly draw. Don't forget, if you're a subscriber, we'll give you something for free. You can get a free car sticker by emailing john@nufcmatters.com. And we also support the food bank on the show. nufcfansfoodbank.co.uk is a virtual bucket where you can make a donation 365 days of the year. Don't forget, pre-match and after-match, Malcolm MacDonald will be at the Dog and Parrot at every home game this season. And you can also see John Gibson at Pumphrey's in the big market, pre-match only. That is a great place to go, Pumphrey's in the big market. And don't forget, you can see Gibbo and Ando there and Super Mac and myself at the Dog and Parrot. And just like that, I'm back.
Magic.
Great stuff. Nick Pope, potentially for England. Sorry to cut you off in mid-flow, Ben.
Yeah, I think that with Jordan Pickford injured, he will be called up and stands a good chance of getting some game time as well, and richly deserved, really. It's sort of bizarre to be talking about a 30-year-old normally looking to break into the international fold and kind of stepping up his career. But goalkeepers work like this. They often hit their peak in their late 20s or early 30s and can still have 4 or 5 years. And, you know, from Pope's point of view, he is hoping to add to those 8 England caps that he's already got. But he's never really been able to solidify himself as a regular in the setup, not since 2018 anyway. He was first called up in, I think, March 2018. He was named in the 23-man England squad for the 2018 World Cup, let's not forget. He made his debut, I believe, against Costa Rica, also in 2018. And then you kind of flash forwards and you have to wait a year for the competitive debut, which was in the Euro qualifiers. I believe, from the top of my head, he kept a clean sheet against Kosovo. And then in 2021, he played, I believe, against Albania as well. So actually, he's got this really great record of keeping a string of clean sheets when he does get an opportunity. So he's very much England's lucky charm in that respect. And yet between 2018 and now 2022, I think off the top of my head, he's only got 8 caps. So it's about trying to use Newcastle and that consistency at the level that he's playing to persuade Gareth Southgate that he's an option as a starter. I still think Pickford, when fit, is the number 1 in Qatar, and therefore Pope is going to struggle to get too many caps. But he'll be there. He'll be part of the squad. And the better he does for Newcastle, the more chance he's got of changing Gareth Southgate's mind between now and Qatar.
Yeah, it's great to see. And I mean, Newcastle, although it hasn't been a fantastic start of the season, VAR decisions, Newcastle maybe is getting too many draws as opposed to wins. Ryan Fraser called up for Scotland as well. It's a sign of the times, that Newcastle's on the up.
Yeah, it is. And I think that there's the results versus the mood and the momentum. So you could argue that the 2-1 loss to Liverpool was disappointing, naturally, because Newcastle were leading in the game and conceded a injury time goal that meant that they walked away with nothing. But what do fans take from that game? Well, they've shown, even against an injury hit Liverpool, and that's the caveat, that they can compete against the big teams. And Manchester City in the draw was another great example of that. You're 3-1 up. So, of course, it's disappointing not to take all 3 points. But the way that they approach both those games, Newcastle, and the spirit and the kind of quality that they showed at home against a really big team, and then the positivity away from home, is just in stark contrast to how they'd have played against Steve Bruce. And home to Manchester City, that open with that level of intensity, they'd have probably lost the game 5-0. And away from Liverpool, they'd have set up to try and take a point, and they might have lost that game by 3 or 4 as well. So, as I've said many times, this is not about Newcastle being at the moment 4th in the table or competing for Europe necessarily. It's about them showing a style of football that gets fans excited and makes them think that they're going to go for it in every single game. And I think that is exactly what we've seen so far. So I don't think it's been a terribly disappointing start to the season. The Forest win was a clean sheet, but it was a bit cumbersome at times. But you expect a bit of an unknown quantity, particularly against a newly promoted side, and especially against Nottingham Forest with a whole raft of new players. And then they dug in away at Brighton, which at the time maybe was a bit underwhelming, but I thought it was a very solid away performance. And we've all seen how Brighton have started the season. So that's not a bad result. I mean, they put 5 past my team, Leicester, at home. So to keep a clean sheet against Brighton, retrospectively, I think was really very strong. And then Manchester City was one of the best performances of the season. There's no shame in getting an away point against Wolves. They could have beaten Liverpool, and it was unfortunate the manner in which they conceded. And then I think the only one that was a bit underwhelming was Crystal Palace, but there was VAR controversy in that game. So overall, I think that Newcastle haven't done too much wrong, really. And now I think because of the postponement for the West Ham game, there's 3 games that are really going to define at least the early part of the season, because home to Bournemouth and then away at Fulham and then home to Brentford should be 9 points for me if Newcastle perform. And then suddenly there's an entirely different complexion on the season heading away at Manchester United, because if you take 9 from 9 there, then I would expect Newcastle to probably be 6th in the table at that point. And then you're going to Manchester United, who might be 5th or 4th in the table, and you're thinking, well, if we make a statement and get something from Old Trafford, then we're heading into that last sort of month or so before the World Cup break with a real opportunity to actually get to the midway point of the season somewhere very much in the race for European football. Whereas conversely, if they, I don't know, only take 4 points from the next 3 games, which would still not be terrible, and then lose away at Manchester United, you start thinking mid-table mediocrity, and that's where the fan base will be divided. I still don't think it's a bad thing if Newcastle just finish this season 10th, as long as they approach every game like they did Manchester City and Liverpool, and then they'll have the January window to work out what they want to do. But I really think just because of how the fixtures are falling, that even though we're very early in the season, that Bournemouth, Fulham, Brentford cycle leading up to Manchester United is massive in the context of Newcastle's season.
Yeah, I would agree, mate, 100%. Other news, you may remember those pre-takeover days, Ben, when we first met, when Newcastle were hoping that the takeover was going to go through. Newcastle United Supporters Trust did set up the pledge scheme, which the aim was to buy a percentage of Newcastle United. Something which, of course, is now thankfully been parked because of the takeover. £200,000 was raised by the trust's members as part of the 1892 pledge scheme, and they've now suggested the charities that they want to put that forward to. They've put it to the members' vote, but just so you're aware, £83,500 to the Alan Shearer Foundation, £59,000 to the Sir Bobby Robson Foundation, £30,000 to the Newcastle United Foundation, and £27,500 to the food bank. What's your thoughts on that, Ben?
Well, I think, first of all, that initiative was brilliant, and it's great to see the collaboration between that particular project and the fan base to make sure that those who invested in the first place are comfortable with where the money goes, and they're all very worthy foundations. We know that the food bank does tremendous work in and around match days, so it's really good to see them rewarded with a share of the pot, and that donation will go a very long way. And then I've always had huge respect and passion for the Alan Shearer Foundation in particular, and I think that not only is that money well spent, but it's still an area of football that needs improvement. So for those that are not aware, the Shearer Foundation is a hyper-focused charity, if you like, in and around Newcastle, and it specialises in funding those with disability, and particularly those that have complex disabilities and things like sensory impairments. And that charity needs to, I believe, raise between 200 and 250,000 each year to ensure that they can continue to provide what they call free sensory and specialist leisure activities, or also free and subsidized breaks for profoundly disabled children and adults. And Alan Shearer and those that work for that foundation do phenomenal work. And as ever, the matchday experience for those with profound disability can be very tough. And it's important that clubs continue to look at how they can improve and enhance the matchday experience to make sure that it's inclusive, and those that attend with profound disabilities feel welcome, they feel a part of the action, they feel an affinity with the players and the football club, and it isn't overwhelming. And those with a profound disability, whether it's physical or mental, can feel very overwhelmed within a football environment. And naturally, as football stadiums get noisier and as success comes, everything kind of gets supercharged. And if you've got a profound disability, that can be tough, because the more volume of traffic, the more volume of crowds, the more volume of noise, it can all impact on somebody in a negative way that is profoundly disabled. So I think that a charity like that is obviously very important to Newcastle as both a football club and a city. And the Bobby Robson Foundation has a great affinity with the football club as well. And it's just a wonderful kind of charity too. And it was really good to see during the Great North Run a number of different people in the sports industry and in the media industry fundraising also for that particular foundation as well. So I think they're all great causes. And as I've said before, I just love it and I respect it when instead of people going into fundraising with a charity in mind, and this is a bit of an anomaly because the original donations was something a little bit different, but I love it when a organization or a supporters trust says to the fan base, you're the ones that gave this money, you're the ones that provide the feedback or vote on where you want the money to go, because then you know that there is an overwhelming majority to make sure that everyone that's donated is actually comfortable with that. And that's just really good to see. So all credit to the original fundraising, all credit to the original idea, and all credit for repurposing the money in a way that has a direct benefit to Newcastle, its fan base, its football club and its community.
Yeah. A Great North Run. People will be sick of hearing me go on about it, but it was a great day, mate. I walked around with Vince, who was a watcher of the show. He was dressed as Darth Vader, bless him. It was absolutely beating down the sun on parts of the course, but we got around in 4 hours. We walked it. It was fantastic, and I'm really pleased that I did it. I will do it again, and currently sitting at around 1,300 quid I've raised for the Bradley Lowry Foundation as well, which shows that football knows no boundaries. Predominantly a Sunderland-based charity that, with big connections to Sunderland Football Club. That's the reason that I was more than happy to do it, because that's what it's all about in the Northeast. Let's get on to football matters, Ben. Newcastle United signed Isak. They didn't sign him to sit on the bench. We know he's not going to. If Wilson does make it back for the Bournemouth game, is there a chance we might see Isak taking up that right-hand side berth that we know that he likes to play in, where he plays on the right, cuts inside and scores goals?
Yeah, I think it's very possible, and that is how I think he can interact with Callum Wilson. But I also think that the price tag is a little bit deceptive here, because Alexander Isak is quite a streaky footballer and he's still only 22 years of age. So, of course, he's not joined Newcastle to long-term sit on the bench, but I think that he does appreciate his kind of squad value and knows that it might take a full season or two to either oust Wilson regularly, or he might take on that wider role, which he thoroughly enjoys and excels in. So there's just that versatility. But I don't think that just because of the price tag, he'll have to start every game. And he may well be a very useful option in certain games to come off the bench for Newcastle. And the fact that he came into the side and scored against Liverpool is almost a bit deceptive, because it adds to that kind of cult status. It adds to the belief that it's £60 million worth of goals. But he's not really a goal scorer in that 1 in 2. So if you look at Real Sociedad, and going back to 21-22, he scored 6 goals in 32 La Liga games. The previous season, he was 1 in 2 in La Liga. I think it was 17 and 34. And then the one before that, it was about 9 goals in 37 games off the top of my head. So it all depends on how he's purposed. It all depends on where he plays. It all depends on what his job is in the team. But he relishes that wider position where he can cut inside. And as I've said already, sometimes when a player comes into a new club with a big reputation, personality, or price tag, we get in this scenario where, as a fan base anyway, they get cult status. And it's the same for Bruno as well, because he was so good from kind of January onwards last season and scored a disproportionate amount of goals that I think will even out over the course of this season and beyond. Everyone suddenly sees him as maybe box to box. Everyone suddenly sees him as a goal scorer. Everyone suddenly sees him as a hero. And he is a hero, of course, but that goal scoring will kind of level off, in my opinion, and he'll start contributing in other ways that aren't just about bursting into the box with big and important goals. And Isak naturally is a goal scorer, but it wouldn't remotely surprise me if he goes back to those Sociedad numbers and ends up playing kind of 25 to 30 odd times this season in the Premier League and not always starting, as opposed to playing in all the remainder of the games, and isn't that 1 in 2 that at the moment people are thinking of because they've seen him score against Liverpool and they're like, right, he'll probably end up scoring against Palace as well. He'll probably end up scoring most games. I'll put him in my fantasy league team. I don't think personally he'll get 10 goals or into double figures this season, but I think he'll contribute in a variety of different ways. And that's going to be really interesting to see, where does Eddie Howe deploy him? Does he want Isak to lead the line? Does he eventually see him in the next season or two as being that focal point and replacing Callum Wilson? Is there a possibility that he'll work with Callum Wilson and the formation will be tweaked at times, maybe not to start with in games, but in game management scenarios with kind of two up top playing next to each other? Or is it more likely that he'll play wide? And I think to begin with, we'll see Wilson lead the line when fit, and Isak will be wide and encouraged to cut inside. But then game management is as important. So when you look at those frustrating kind of games like the 0-0 against Palace, that's where Howe, with Isak in the team, has the ability to suddenly tweak the formation and play two up top, or even have Isak, which is a role I think that he can develop into, drop a little bit deeper but centrally in order to win balls and allow Callum Wilson and others to run on beyond him, and let others be the wide players and let Wilson be the kind of central player. And then Isak's got that ability to win the ball a bit deeper and then offload it to someone in a wide area and then get into the box alongside Wilson. So it's that link-up play. And that's where he's been a bit inconsistent in his past. That's where he's been a little bit streaky. He's been quite a prolific goal scorer. He's been very good on the ball. He's been excellent at cutting inside. But if you ask him to kind of start the link-up play and then end the link-up play, but not from a wide area, I'm talking specifically from a central area, that's the part of his game that he can still develop. He's not bad at it, but he's not been asked to do that as often at Sociedad or during the few games that he played for Borussia Dortmund. So let's see in a game management situation when Howe needs to tweak things because they're not going according to plan, whether or not he can fulfill that role as well. It's certainly one to watch between now and the end of the season.
Yeah, VAR. We've spoken about it a few times already this season. Do you think that weekend horribleness, as maybe the Queen might have described it, is going to be a lesson to all, and we're going to see, things improve over the course of the next weekend and future games, Ben?
Well, I've said it many times that VAR is just the technology, and how the technology is applied is absolutely crucial. And right now, what we are seeing is referees, either through encouragement or caution, let things run their course. So their gut instinct, their first decision, and even at times their final decision is changing. And I get, for example, that an official doesn't want to put the flag up before letting play run because you want to see the conclusion, and VAR can ultimately make that final decision. And as we get semi-automated offsides coming into the Premier League, things there will be a lot quicker and a lot easier. But when it comes to argy-bargy in the box, when it comes to the push into the goalkeeper that we saw against Crystal Palace, when it comes to the Juventus game at the weekend, which was crazy because there was clearly a goal that should have stood, but VAR didn't have all of the angles, and yet Sky Italy did. So you're seeing clearly that the decision is wrong through an angle that television have got that VAR don't. And you're thinking, how do VAR not have all the same angles that television have got? And of course, TV and VAR could be working together. And if VAR allow the conversation happening to be audible to fans and those watching on TV, then in return, the television cameras can be hooked up to the VAR room and you can look at it from lots of different angles. So there's all kinds of issues at the moment. But the main one, I think, is that officials are not empowered to make the final decision, and they need to use the monitor more. They need all of the available angles, and we need to hear the conversations that are taking place. And I'm still a firm believer that the referee needs to be accountable. So we want the technology to be as accurate as possible. We want the technology to provide all the measurements, and we want it to be as fast as possible. And if we persist with this, then the speed will definitely improve. And I think over time, there's a very foreseeable scenario where perhaps the official has actually got access to a kind of monitor on a sort of virtual notebook. If they're carrying around a notebook that's only about that big, why can't that effectively be a small iPad or phone? And why can't they open it up to have a look? And then if they need a better angle, they can always go to a monitor. But there's absolutely no reason why the official can't look at things openly and quickly. But the point here is that in every instance, the official on the field should, I think, be making the final decision. They shouldn't be reliant on VAR telling them that they're wrong or that they need to take another look, because as soon as they're told that, they're like, yikes, a whole panel of people in a room at Stockley Park are telling me that I need to go to a monitor, so I must have made an error. And then that warps the opinion. And I think that's one point. And as we get quicker and we don't want to delay the game too much, then the official who is actually on the field will be able to do that. Whereas I think right now, one of the other issues is if the official second doubts themselves and then wants to keep looking at the monitor, they feel like the game should be slowed down. Whereas if you've got a Premier League referee that happens to be at Stockley Park saying, here's how I'm calling it, I think the official on the field can, to some extent, just think, no worries, thanks for that. It seems pretty clear cut. If you're happy with it, we'll move on. And not only does that speed up the game, but the referee probably thinks, well, if they've made an error, it's not on me, it's on the VAR. So the referee on the field kind of thinks, fine, the buck has been passed. And we just can't have that, in my opinion. And the final thing I would say is that I like an aspect of debate and human error. So if the official who's made a call on the field, having watched it quickly on a monitor, still can't decide, then at that point, having looked at the technology, they should be going with their original decision and saying, that's still my original decision. And then if we need to debate it, if we need to discuss it, so be it. But if you and me and the official and VAR, after watching it a certain number of times, still can't get to a definitive conclusion, then the referee on the field has to keep making that decision. And if we debate it and we disagree with it, then at that point, that's just football. And obviously, if they do come to a determination, then the technology helps in that respect. But I think that the challenge at the moment is that that relationship between the referee and VAR is not perfect. And the time it takes between the referee learning of a decision and VAR going over and over and over again through footage is not perfect. And then the referees are not using the monitor enough because they don't want to slow down the game, but for critical decisions, they have to. Then there's not a clear definition as to what counts as interference with something like offside, or when does the phase of play leading up to the goal end. So for those that are not aware, go back and look at that Juventus game, and you had a goal that was disallowed wrongly, and then you had a load of celebrations and fracases that resulted in sendings off and second yellows, and then the goal never stood, but the sendings off did, and then play resumed, and then the match finished 2-2, and then the goal should have stood. And that's absolutely farcical. And then we subsequently found out that television had clear angles and VAR didn't. So I think we need to look at this. I think it still may take 2 or 3 seasons to get all of the appropriate technology in to speed things up. But right now, the referees just need to stick to their guns. They need to look at the monitors on critical decisions. And we need to hear the dialogue in real time so we can at least understand. Because if you hear that dialogue with Newcastle Palace and the official says, I've looked at it and I appreciate what you are saying, VAR, but I don't think the player has been pushed into the goalkeeper. I think the player has run into the goalkeeper and I believe that is a foul and I'm sticking to that. Then you say, okay, every referee is a part of the game and he acknowledges that there might be a push into the goalkeeper and he says no. And then Newcastle fans can riot and say, this referee is wrong, this referee is talking nonsense, because it clearly, in my opinion anyway, was a push into the goalkeeper. But at least you know. And then you say, okay, we got a referee and that was his perspective. But if you don't hear it, you start to think, has the referee seen it? And it was the same in the Chelsea-Spurs game with the hair pull on Marc Cucurella. You start to think, have VAR and have the referee even seen it? So if we're then hearing VAR and they are not acknowledging it, then you're like, yikes, they haven't even noticed this. And at that point, there's a far bigger problem. But if you hear them discussing it in real time and they come to a conclusion, then at that point you say, okay. And then what you could do, which I think would be really cool in the game, is if we're hearing it, the manager can hear it. And that's when I think, even though it's very American, you could have a challenge. So imagine a scenario where Eddie Howe is listening and he hears them make the final decision. And he's saying, I don't even think they've clocked there's a push, because they're talking about other things. And then they're saying that it's disallowed. And then Howe could put his hand up and say to the fourth official, I think you've missed something. I've seen it. I've heard you. And I'd like you to look again, because see there's a clear push. And that would have happened at the Chelsea Spurs game, where Thomas Tuchel, then in charge, would have said, I think you've missed a hair pull. I want you to look at it again. And it might have changed things. So I think that dialogue is also very important. But I feel for Newcastle at this point, because I think that the goal should have stood. I think that there was nothing the Newcastle player really did wrong. There was clearly a nudge into the goalkeeper. So therefore, if the first infraction is at the Palace end, then you're playing the advantage, and the goal should have stood, and then they would have won that game 1-0.
And now, of course, we've got new technology coming in the World Cup, 3D animation. The new system coming in, semi-automated offside technology.
Yeah, we've seen this as well before. It's already been trialed, and I think it's very useful. It's a brainchild of Arsene Wenger, who originally called it automatic offsides. And I think that it will just speed a lot of things up, and it will take effectively measurements in a different way. And we therefore will have a speedier notion of finding out if someone is or isn't offside. And over time, what I like about it is that we go back to effectively full circle, where, if your player was clean through, right, a few years back and had a one-on-one, and the official put his flag up, then everyone stopped. The whistle blew, the striker put his hands up in the air, and fans basically went, offside. And then if afterwards you saw it again and you thought that it was close or onside, you might moan, but you never actually knew the resolution. So as mad as you might be, you don't know whether that player would have scored. And now, because officials are being asked to keep their flag down, we're then seeing the full resolution, and it's taking a lot of time. And then if it was offside anyway, you've wasted a lot of time, you've slowed down the rhythm of the game. And of course, if the goal stands, there's a kind of debate still about, was it the right angle? Did the referee have to go to VAR for that long? Semi-automated offsides should eventually bring us full circle. And if the technology proves to be accurate, then you'll actually get a little vibration instantly, a bit like with the goal line technology, and then play will just be stopped. So all of this controversy, all of this what could have happened, all of this the ball went in the back of the net and then we had to look at it again, will be negated over time as the technology develops, because we'll just know it's offside. We'll take that as a given. We'll trust in the technology. We won't even have to look at it. A whistle will be blown. Play will be stopped. So the game will be sped up, and we won't have as many of these talking points comparative to officials now just letting the play go on, even if they thought it was offside. And that's the bit I don't like, when an official basically knows it's a yard offside, but they let play continue just in case. And then a goal gets scored, and then players celebrate, and they might take their shirt off and they might get booked for it. And fans may celebrate, and then the official deep down is thinking VAR will definitely call this offside. And that's what the semi-automated offsides are trying to negate. Of course, there'll be times when it's so clear cut that we don't want play to continue. And there'll be other times where it's very tight. And that's where currently officials want to keep their flag down just in case, because they've only got one angle and they're not 100% sure. And semi-automated offsides will give you lots of different 3D angles to look at things quicker in those scenarios to get to the bottom as to whether a goal should or shouldn't have stood. But I think what we're trying to cut out of the game is just when the actual human is positive it's offside, but under the rules, they don't want to stick their flag up just in case. And that leads to a knock-on effect of all these different scenarios that I've just outlined that are time-consuming and unhealthy for the game. And as we saw with Juventus at the weekend, it can result in someone celebrating and getting booked or sent off. And bizarrely, if the goal doesn't stand, if the celebration effectively doesn't stand, the booking still does. And that can still have an effect on the game going forwards, as we saw at the weekend in Serie A. So I think these are a very welcome decision. And that's why I always say with VAR and technology, you have to kind of judge it annoyingly, but it is just the reality within 5 or 10 seasons almost. And if you look at a generation that are born now and will only grow up with this, when they get to 20 odd, they'll just welcome the technology because football will be faster and more accurate. But right now there's teething problems because you have to introduce one kind of technology and then you have to evolve it and develop it and react to all of the disasters and frustrations. And we had this with the pass back rule when that got changed. And we had this with the goalkeepers being allowed to play out in their own 6-yard area and have players inside that. And over time, we'll adapt and technology will improve. And then hopefully football will be all the better for it. But right now we're in a transitional phase. Rules are changing. Technology is changing. It's inconsistent. It's a mess. And we have to hope that semi-automated offsides and other tweaks to VAR in the next season or two will create a uniformity, will create an accuracy. Nobody really complains about too much of the technology in rugby, for example. It's been more long-standing. It's very much welcomed. And I think the final thing as well, I would say, is just the players have to get used to it. And right now, these are players predominantly that have never had technology and now are having technology, and they're seeing it applied infuriatingly in a very inconsistent way. Whereas if you take, again, a 15-year-old player that will burst on the scene in 5 years, or if you flash forwards in 10 years, every single player will be well used to being hauled back for a semi-automated offside. Every single player will be used to be scoring and then the check being subject to VAR. And I think that will change the culture and the dynamic of how managers and players respond. So when you look at Declan Rice against Chelsea going straight onto Twitter and saying VAR is a joke, he's got a point, because it is a joke at times at the moment. But I don't think you'll see too many players doing that in 10 years because they'll have just grown up with the technology and it will improve season on season. So I still don't think VAR is a bad thing. I think it's just a byproduct that by using it as opposed to theorizing about it or trialing it, we now see the kinks. And those kinks are horrific at times at the moment. And it's a massive shame that they're costing teams like Newcastle points. But I still think football in a decade will be better for VAR than without VAR.
Quick prediction for Newcastle versus Bournemouth this weekend, please, Ben.
I think that Bournemouth responded brilliantly, by the way, after losing Scott Parker and getting absolutely battered by Liverpool 9-0, and then to actually come back against that game that they played last time out. 2 times because they drew 0-0 with Wolves first, to come back from 2-0 down to Forest and win that game 3-2 was incredible. And they've taken 4 points now from their last 2 games. So all credit to them. But I don't think the run continues against Newcastle. I think that they will be too strong on this occasion, especially at St James's Park. I can see Newcastle hitting 3 or 4 against them and keeping a clean sheet as well. So I think this will be a 3-0 Newcastle win. But yeah, still credit to Bournemouth for how they've responded to that horrible defeat to Liverpool and to the sacking of Scott Parker. But I think this will be all 3 points for Newcastle and they'll get back to winning ways.
You'll do for me and our viewers, Ben. As always, mate, thanks for giving up your time to come on the show. Look forward to speaking to you soon, mate. Take care.
Yeah, look forward to it. Have a good week and good luck with your trip to London as well. I hope that that's emotional and meaningful for you when you make that trip, and we'll speak soon.
Thanks, mate. Take care. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.